Business Communication Challenges with Hungarian Partners. A virtual meeting between Marco Bianchi, quality manager at an Italian manufacturing company, and Dr. Sophia Chen, a cross-cultural business consultant. They are discussing Marco's experiences working with Hungarian business partners.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, Marco. You mentioned some challenges in your initial interactions with your Hungarian partners. Could you elaborate on what specific differences you noticed compared to your work with Spanish partners?
Of course. The most striking difference was the communication style. With our Spanish partners, business discussions often start with personal conversation, asking about family, discussing football, sharing a meal. These relationship-building activities are integrated into the business process. In Hungary, my attempts at similar small talk seemed to make people uncomfortable. The meetings were much more focused on the business agenda from the very beginning.
That's a common observation. Hungarian business culture tends to maintain clearer boundaries between professional and personal relationships, especially in initial interactions. If you had researched Hungarian business culture before your first visit, you would have been prepared for this difference.
Absolutely. If I understood their expectations better, I wouldn't have tried to build relationships the same way I do in Spain. Another challenge was around decision-making. In Spain, decisions often evolve through conversation, and there's flexibility in implementation. With our Hungarian partners, they expected extremely detailed specifications and documentation before making decisions. When I suggested we could work out certain details as we progressed, they seemed very uncomfortable.
That reflects Hungary's higher uncertainty avoidance compared to Spain. Hungarian business culture typically prefers to minimize ambiguity through comprehensive information and clear procedures. If your company had provided more detailed documentation initially, you might be further along in the project now.
That's true. If we had understood this cultural preference, we would have prepared much more detailed specifications from the beginning. Instead, we had to go back and create additional documentation, which delayed the project by several weeks.
How did you notice hierarchy influencing your interactions?
That was another significant difference. In our Spanish partnerships, while there's respect for position, the atmosphere is relatively informal. First names are used quickly, and junior team members actively participate in discussions. In Hungary, I noticed much more formal address, using titles and surnames, and a clearer deference to senior people in meetings. If I hadn't eventually adapted to this formality, I would have unintentionally appeared disrespectful.
Yes, Hungarian business culture typically shows greater respect for hierarchy and formal protocols. Even if you had previous European experience, you wouldn't necessarily have been prepared for these specific differences. How about meeting styles and time management?
The difference was striking. With our Spanish partners, meetings might start a few minutes late. Agendas are treated as guidelines rather than strict structures, and discussions can continue if they're productive, even if they go over the scheduled time. Our Hungarian partners arrived exactly on time or a few minutes early, followed the agenda precisely, and concluded meetings as scheduled. If we had known this in advance, we would have structured our meetings differently from the beginning.
That reflects different time orientations. Hungary tends toward a more monochromic approach, where schedules and agendas are strictly followed, while Spain has more polychromic tendencies with greater flexibility. How did you eventually adapt to these differences?
It was a learning process. For meetings, I now prepare detailed agendas with specific time allocations and send them in advance. I provide comprehensive documentation rather than conceptual overviews. I maintain more formal address until specifically invited to use first names. And I focus on demonstrating technical competence and reliability before attempting to build more personal relationships.
Those are excellent adaptations. Have you found any advantages to the Hungarian approach?
Definitely. Their thoroughness and precision have actually helped us improve our quality documentation. If we hadn't partnered with them, we wouldn't be implementing these improvements now. Their analytical approach has identified potential issues that we might have missed with a more flexible process. So while the adjustment was challenging, it's brought benefits.
That's an important observation. Different cultural approaches often have distinct strengths that can complement each other. Have you found any common ground that helps bridge the cultural differences?
Yes, despite the different approaches, I've noticed that quality professionals in both cultures share fundamental values: commitment to standards, data-driven decisions, and continuous improvement. When discussions focus on these shared professional values, the cultural differences become less significant. If I had recognized this common ground earlier, I would have emphasized it more in our initial interactions.
That's an excellent strategy. Professional values often transcend cultural differences and provide a foundation for effective collaboration. What advice would you give to someone working with Hungarian partners for the first time?
First, I'd say respect the formality, especially initially. Use titles and surnames until invited to do otherwise. Second, be extremely well prepared with detailed documentation and specific proposals. Ambiguity and figuring things out as you go is generally not appreciated. Third, be punctual and respect agendas and schedules. And finally, demonstrate technical competence and reliability before expecting to develop more personal relationships.
That's excellent advice. I'd add that it's important to recognize that neither approach is inherently better or worse. They're simply different cultural patterns that have evolved in different contexts. The goal isn't to judge, but to understand and adapt effectively.
Absolutely. If I had approached these differences with judgment rather than curiosity, I would have damaged the relationship rather than strengthening it. It's been a valuable learning experience that's made me more effective not just with Hungarian partners, but in all my cross-cultural interactions.
That's the essence of developing cultural intelligence, learning from each experience and building adaptability that transfers to new cultural contexts. Thank you for sharing your insights, Marco. They provide valuable lessons for anyone navigating cultural differences in professional settings.